Hi, on July 11th, one of the most high-profile comebacks in UFC history will take place. Conor McGregor is returning after a 5-year break, and right away he's facing Max Holloway at a new weight class, for both of them welterweight. You'd think that McGregor's name alone would move the market, but here's what's interesting. From the very announcement, both the bookmakers and Polymarket itself have made Holloway the favorite. This isn't just hype, these are the numbers, and today I'll break down why the market thinks this way and whether it matches what I see. According to the data, here we have a set of sources, small, but we'll get specific data and concrete analytics from them. The first is the Topology website. Here we have UFC statistics and fight metric statistics. We'll be looking not only at the record, of course, but also at activity. How many times has the fighter entered the octagon in the last 5 years? Let's take a look at Conor. We can see that his last fight was in July 2021. Since then, he hasn't entered the octagon even once. Whereas, Holloway's last fight was in 2026. If we are looking at the timeline roughly speaking, Holloway kept his professional career going without ever really stopping for a moment. He never took any significant breaks from the octagon, and he didn't rest, so to speak, in the same way that Conor did. That's a huge advantage, since 5 years without competitive fights is significant. This is a factor that can't be compensated for by any training camp, because reaction and sense of distance are only developed in real fights. The very next key element that we're going to use in order to compare the two fighters is going to be as follows: detailed striking statistics, maybe the accuracy of distribution by zones. Here on this site, there's some statistics for Holloway. The statistics clearly demonstrate that Holloway lands about 7 significant strikes per minute, from a total of roughly 15 strikes thrown every single minute. That is consistently ranked as one of the most impressive and highest output rates in UFC history over an entire career. As we can observe from these remarkable figures, Holloway has remarkably never been stopped by strikes in any professional fight. While for Conor McGregor, it is exactly the opposite. It is all about his legendary one-shot knockout power. He possesses a significant amount of physical power, but he competes with a notably low volume of strikes. He has several bouts that ended prematurely in his favor, by way of knockout, though he is currently coming off a pair of back-to-back defeats in his most recent outings, in his recent fights, including 2 technical defeats to Dustin Poirier. And third, these are the well-known facts. It's the story of moving between weight classes and physical stats. Both of these fighters are making the jump up to welterweight. For Holloway, this is his debut at 170 pounds after a career at lightweight. For McGregor, it's also essentially a new weight class. After many years at lightweight, I look at how a fighter handles an unfamiliar weight. This can provide an advantage in power, but it usually reduces speed and endurance in the first fights at a new weight class. Therefore, since Conor McGregor hasn't fought for the last 5 years, roughly speaking, plus this move to a new weight class, it will significantly affect his endurance, speed, striking, accuracy, and reaction. This long break has a very critical impact on him, and McGregor's strengths are his powerful, precise left straight, a punch considered one of the most knockout-worthy in the history of the UFC's lightweight division. He also has vast experience on big stages, is a champion in 2 weight classes, and has participated in the highest grossing fights in history. According to reports from his camp, he has been preparing with an unusual level of seriousness. For this comeback, that's something to keep in mind, although it's impossible to verify from the outside. McGregor's weaknesses, as I already mentioned, include a 5-year break from professional fights. This is critical for reaction time, cardio, and sense of distance, things that can only be honed in a competitive setting. That's why we have a clear favorite here, and that's Holloway. And his recent results in MMA, only 1 win since 2016, 2 losses at the top level, with the last one due to a serious injury. Conor is 37 years old, an age when reaction time and the ability to keep up the pace against an active opponent start to decline. For the first time, he's fully competing at welterweight against a specialist who has also moved up to this division. You see what I mean? Holloway is simply far too formidable of a challenge for Conor, because he has absolutely never stopped his momentum. He consistently dedicated himself to rigorous preparation and constant training. He's had fights throughout all these years while Conor, frankly speaking, was taking a break. Yes, his strengths. If we list Holloway's strengths, as I've already mentioned, they are among the very best. He holds the record for the most strikes per round in UFC history, overwhelming his opponents with volume and constant pressure. He has never been stopped by strikes in his entire career. He's withstood barrages from the hardest punchers in the division. He's active and consistent. 9 fights in the last 3 years. His form has never dipped. Psychologically, he's used to being the favorite in big fights in recent years. Weaknesses. Debut, just like Conor, at welterweight. It's unknown how he'll handle fighting physically bigger opponents without prior experience cutting to this weight. And in his recent fights against top opponents, like Oliveira and Topuria, he lost on the final scorecards despite his activity. He might underestimate McGregor's one-punch power and get caught with a counter early in the fight, especially if he rushes forward from the very first seconds, as he usually does. So, what's the point for us in all this, right? We placed a bet of 100,000 on Holloway's victory, because we agree with the market. The market is justifiably giving the advantage to Holloway. Activity and volume of strikes versus a 5-year layoff is a significant factor, and this is evident throughout the entire distance. If since 2016 Conor has only 1 win, Holloway has many victories. There are losses too, but the wins still outweigh them. McGregor only leads in one-punch knockout power, which creates 2 scenarios. The early scenario, where McGregor's power is decisive while he's fresh, and the late scenario, favoring volume and endurance. All analysts agree, their logic is similar. The longer the fight goes, the more the advantage shifts toward Holloway. This is not a fight with an absolutely predictable outcome, it's a fight with a specific, measurable risk on both sides. And that's exactly why the odds on McGregor keep rising as the fight approaches, rather than dropping as they would with a completely one-sided prediction. But that makes sense. But today we've discussed why Holloway is our favorite, and these are reliable facts, all analytical. And in the UFC, it's especially important to read the market conditions all the way through. Just like everywhere else, victory by decision, victory only by knockout, submission, a specific round, these are different markets with different prices. A 5-round fight is the main event. Let me remind you, it goes 5 rounds this fight. It gives more time for execution, both for Holloway's volume and for McGregor's one-punch power. So keep this in mind when choosing a specific market. And always to the very end, check the conditions of the specific market in the market field. What exactly is counted? Only the main fight time? Does it take into account that the fight is only 5 rounds? 5 by the rules, right? And how is the outcome interpreted in the case of a controversial judge's decision? Different market wording for the same fight result. With the same fight result, the outcome can be different depending on the market. The data shows the direction, not a guarantee. Analyze the market in parts, like I do. Match the size of your bet to the actual uncertainty, and the result of the analysis will be more honest than any prediction made on emotions. Subscribe. Goodbye, everyone.